Good morning, children. Welcome to my today's class. Today, I shall deal with the third lesson of English non-detail. The third lesson is Ulysses and the Cyclops. It's written by Charles Lamb. This is an adventurous story. The story is of the king named Ulysses, who had come with his men as he was returning after a war. When he was returning to his place, he had lost his way. So he lost his way and he was caught up in the hands of a monster called the Cyclops. Ulysses and his men were caught up in the hands of a cyclop, Polyphemus. So the whole story is about the king with his men, the struggles with the cyclop, and then how he finally escapes from the hands of the cyclop. If you see to the title, you see two words, Ulysses and Cyclops. So who was this Ulysses? Ulysses was the king of the island of Itheca in Greece. The Cyclops, this was a race of giant shepherds having one eye in the middle of forehead, who were staying in the island of Sicily. So these Cyclops had one eye on their forehead. They had a single eye. So knowing about the Ulysses, knowing about the Cyclops, shall we start the lesson? Page number 134. The lesson begins with traveling the whole night by the unknown way. Traveling the whole night. That is coasting. The word coasting is used. The unknown way they were traveling, and they finally reached the shore when the day broke out. That's early morning. They reached the shore at the daybreak, that is early morning, they reached the shore. And this was the land of Cyclops. Cyclops, that clan of people, they stayed there. These were giant shepherds. So, Cyclops were giant shepherds. They neither sowed nor plowed. They neither sowed nor plowed, plowing the field. So they did not know agriculture. To plow the field, we know farmer plows the field. So these people did not know anything. Neither they knew how to sow the seeds, nor they knew how to plow the land. So they did not know agriculture. But the land where they lived was so good that it produced wheat, barley, and grapes. But see, this thing is mentioned in the book. But at least to grow wheat, we have to sow seeds. So they must be knowing the basic, at least. They had to throw the seeds. After use, maybe they were throwing there, and that is how the wheat, barley, grapes were growing. The Cyclops neither had bread nor wine. So they did not know. They never tasted bread. They never tasted wine. They did not know the art of cultivation. Each man there lived for himself, without any laws, without any government. They did not have anything like a state, a kingdom. They all lived on their own and for themselves. They lived in the caves and on the steep of mountains. Each person's household was governed as per his mood. Caprice, the word used is caprice, as per his mood. He used to run his home and was not governed by anyone at all. See, when we stay in a country, we have to obey certain rules. As citizens of India, we follow certain rules, certain laws. But there was no law in that land. They had no ships, they had no boats. Who? The Cyclops. They did not know agriculture, they did not know cultivation, they had no ships, they had no boats, means they never went for trade. They had no trade, they had no commerce. They did not have any wish to visit other shores. But the place they lived had convenient places for harbors and shipping. The facilities were there, but they never made use of it. It was to this unknown place that Ulysses had landed with his 12 men. So Ulysses landed here by mistake. It was as he was returning to his own land, he lost his way and he landed up here in this place. He came here to find out. When they reached there by mistakes and they wanted to see what kind of people lived there. So they wanted to explore and see what sort of men dwelt there. To dwell means to stay. So Ulysses wanted to know what kind of men were staying on that particular land. He wanted to know if men who dwelt there, who stayed there, they were friendly or not. He wanted to study about the hospitality towards the strangers. So he wanted to know what kind of men lived there, how they treated their guests, how they treated the strangers, with what hospitality, with what care and love and affection they treated the strangers. Ulysses wanted to see. He wanted to know if they were wild and savage. Savage means uncivilized. Civilized, uncivilized. But to his surprise, there were no dwellers who appeared in sight. When Ulysses came there with his men, with his 12 men, he couldn't see anybody there. So he felt, where are these dwellers? I cannot see any person. So the first sign of habitation which came to was a giant cave. So when they came there, Ulysses came there with his men. He saw a big cave, a giant cave. It was rudely fashioned. The size seemed to be very big. So the cave which was there was very big. So it was understood that the owner of the cave was quite big. So he saw the cave, Ulysses saw the big cave, and he felt surely the owner of this cave must be a big giant. There were pillars of oaks and pines in their natural state. So the pillars were oak trees. The whole tree he had brought and he had kept it as pillars there. So you can make out how strong that person who stayed there must be. The whole cave depicted means showed that the owner of the cave was stronger than being skillful. So the appearance of the cave there, what it depicted was that the person who stayed there was not skillful, but he was very strong. Seeing those pillars and all, they could make out. Ulysses and his men could make out. Ulysses entered the cave. He liked the skill of the savage. The cave did not have any art on the wall. That is, there were no drawings on the wall. So the skill almost, there was no much skill which was depicted there on the walls of the cave. Ulysses wanted to see the owner of the cave. He wanted to serve the owner with Greek wine. Ulysses had brought Greek wine with him. So he thought, let me serve this Greek wine to the people here, to the owner of this cave here. He had brought wine in 12 vessels. Ulysses had 12 vessels of wine and he had brought when he came to this land. The Greek wine was said to be so strong that one part of that Greek wine, it was to be mixed with 20 parts of water. So it was so strong. One part of wine, if you take one glass of wine, then 20 glasses of water had to be mixed with it. And even after that, mixing 20 glasses of water, it did not lose the fragrance. It was so delicious that it would tempt a man who smelled it. It would raise the courage of a man to the height of heroic deeds. So that Greek wine is said to be so good. Coming to page number 135, Ulysses and his men took with them goat skin flagon, that is a container, goat skin flagon. They filled with precious liquor and entered the cave. So they took this liquor in it and then they entered. The whole day they stayed in the cave. They saw the flesh of the sheep and the goat fallen in the giant kitchen. They saw the goat milk in the troughs and the pails. So everything was lying there. Milk was lying there in the pans. Then flesh was lying there. They saw the pen. Pen is a place where animals are kept. So they saw a pen where animals were kept, like the sheep, the goat, those animals were kept. But the animals were not there at that time. The owner of the cave must have driven the animals for grazing when he went out in the morning. So they felt that the owner of the cave must be having many animals and he must have taken those animals for grazing. And that is why the animals were not there. Now they spent the whole day in the cave. The day had passed and they were waiting for the owner. They were curious to see how the owner was. They could hear loud noises. The noise was like falling of a house. So when the whole day passed, the evening came. At that time they could hear loud noises. So they felt, what is this loud noise? It is as if a house is falling. The owner of the cave, who was out the whole day feeding his flock in the mountains, had now driven the animals back home. So this owner of the cave had taken all his animals to the mountainside for grazing. He had come back home with such a loud noise. So giant the person must be. He threw down a heap of firewood at the mouth of the cave. This he had collected when the animals grazed. So when the animals were grazing on the mountainside, this cyclop had collected some firewood. So that he threw at the entrance of the cave. So this made a loud noise. Hearing to this noise, the Grecians, that is Ulysses and his men, hid themselves in a remote parts of the cave. They saw this monster. He was Polyphemus, the largest and the savagest of the cyclops. So the cyclop who stayed in this cave was Polyphemus. He boasted himself as the son of Neptune. He looked more like a mountain crag than a man. He didn't look like a man, he was so giant. He looked like a big steep, like a mountain crag. He had a brutal body and a brutal mind. He drove his flock, all that gave milk, to the interior of the cave, inside the cave. So what he did, all the flock which was there, whichever would give milk, he put all these animals inside the cave. He left the male sheep and the he-goats outside. So only those which gave him milk, he put inside the cave. Now taking a big stone, he placed at the entrance of the cave to defend the entrance. He sat down to milk the female eves. Eves are the female sheep. Ram and Eve. Ram, male sheep, Eve, female sheep. And his goats. He kindled, means he put up a fire. He put up a fire and he sat there to milk the female eves. He just had a quick glance around his cave. So he just looked around his cave and he could see two of Ulysses' men hiding. He said, "Oh guests, who are you? Merchants or wandering thieves?" The sound was so loud and fearful. When he asked this, the sound was very loud. None of the men of Ulysses had the strength and the courage to answer to this voice. These Ulysses men, 12 men, were very frightened. So nobody had the guts to answer this giant cyclop. It was only Ulysses who answered. He gained courage, Ulysses, and he answered. He said, they had come not for plunder, not for business. They were Grecians who had lost their way. They were returning from a place called Troy, and they had lost their way. They were returning from Troy and they had lost their way. That is how they landed up in this island. Ulysses said that they would bow before him, that is before the Cyclop, and requested the Cyclop to treat his men with hospitality. The Cyclop replied nothing. He caught hold of two of the Ulysses' men, dashed their brains against the earth, that is ground, and tore them into pieces. He took two men, hit their head against the ground, tore them into pieces, and he swallowed them. He licked the blood. He was a cannibal. The Cyclops who stayed here are cannibal. The person who eats man's flesh is called a cannibal. The Cyclops are man-eaters. So who is a cannibal? A cannibal is a man-eater. This cannibal is asked for 1 mark in the objective type question. The Cyclops are man-eaters. They enjoyed the flesh of humans more than that of goats and kids. So Ulysses and his other 10 men were shocked to see this cannibal. 2 at least, he had dashed their brain, their head against the earth, so they were dead. So remaining were 10. They were shocked to see this cannibal. They saw him drinking the goat's milk after eating the 2 men. Ulysses removed his sword to kill the Cyclop, but felt that Cyclop was very strong and it was not wise to attack him at that time. So we are in page number 136 now. The Cyclops are man-eaters. From there, it is on page number 136. Ulysses and his 10 men were inside the cave. They could not even move out, as the Cyclop had kept a big stone at the entrance. They could not move the stone at the entrance. They were waiting for the Cyclop to remove that. They knew that Polyphemus could move the mass of stone and no one else could do it. He was so strong. Polyphemus, that Cyclop, was so strong that he placed one big rock at the entrance, big stone, and only he could move it. They all were forced to stay within the cave that night. They were helpless. They could not move the entrance stone, big rock which he placed. They all were in fear. The next day, the Cyclop woke. He awoke and he lighted the fire. For his breakfast, he ate another 2 men of Ulysses. He took another 2 men, hit them against the ground, tore them into pieces, swallowed them. He then milked the goats and pushed aside the vast stone and the entrance. So his usual work, early morning, he had his breakfast, he milked the animals, and then he put the stone back at the entrance and he went outside. And he did it with such an ease, so easily he could do it because he was a giant monster. Ulysses, with his 12 men, could not lift this stone. Now 2 have already gone, another 2 went, only 8 are left out. With 8 left out at least, it is impossible for him to move the entrance. But the Cyclop did it very easily, as if we move a pencil with our hand. He moved that stone, that big rock. So he took all the flock out. He drove them with his whistles to the mountains, as usual for grazing. Even his whistle, the whistling also was so loud that it was compared to sharp, strong winds in the storms. It is compared to sharp, strong wind. What? Whistle of the Cyclop of Polyphemus. So strong it was. Ulysses was now left in the cave with his remaining, how many men? 8. 8 men. He had only one way left out now, and that was to use his brain. That strength with his men also he would not get. Ulysses with his 8 men also would not have that strength what Polyphemus alone had. So he said, with the strength and courage I can do nothing, but with my wiseness I can do something. So he said that he had to use his wisdom wisely. His intelligence was to be used against the strength of Cyclops. So it is mentioned in the text how far manly wisdom excels the brutish force. Brutish force. How far manly wisdom excels the brutish force. So he was so courageous. He was so strong. But you can win over him only if you use your little bit of strength with your wiseness. Ulysses chose a stake, that is a wooden pole, from along the woods which the Cyclope had piled up. He used to use the wood for fire, put up the fire, to lit the fire he used to use wood. So from that he took one stake. In length and thickness it was like a long mast, like a wooden pole which we see usually to put up a flag or something, we use a long pole. So that is called a mast. He sharpened and hardened it and put it in the fire. He sharpened it, and to harden it, the little bit of metal was rolled and then they put that whole thing in the fire. He selected 4 men and instructed them what they should do with this stake and made his men perfect in their work. He took a long stake, he sharpened it like a pencil. It became sharp in front. And they put it in the fire and they put a metal in front and they made it red hot. So in that cave, they must have got a piece of metal which they have put, and they have made it like a sharp instrument to put it in his forehead, the eye in the forehead. So this training Ulysses gave to his men. The whole day they were there again. So he told his men, all these things have to be done and each one have to perform your duty very nicely. When it was evening, the Cyclops came home. He drove his sheep. He lost his memory and drove the males also inside the pen. So what he did, instead of leaving the males outside, he took them also inside. Earlier he used to not do this. He shut the stone of the cave. So now he took all the animals inside and he shut the cave. He wanted to have his supper. Supper is an evening meal, not at night. Night meal is called dinner. Afternoon food is called lunch. In between, if we have, evening time if we have, it is called supper. So he wanted to have his supper. He dispatched 2 more men of Ulysses. So he snatched 2 more men. Ulysses now boldly took a bowl of Greek wine. Now he did not allow these 2 men. Ulysses, he gained courage. He took a bowl of Greek wine and asked Cyclops to drink. So this is still page number 136. Coming to page number 137, Ulysses said, Cyclops, take this Greek wine from the hands of your guest. It will help you to digest the man's flesh that you have eaten. If you find it good, then you will have to stop eating the men. So he will tell, see, again you snatch 2 of them, you have eaten them, now you drink this wine, it will help you to digest. The Cyclops took and drank and enjoyed the taste of the wine, which was very new to him. So this Greek wine, they never knew what is wine, how it has to be used. They did not know. But Ulysses, for the first time, he serves a Cyclops with Greek wine. That was excellent. So this Cyclops liked the taste. He asked for more. And he prayed Ulysses to tell his name. He told Ulysses, you tell me what is your name, such a nice thing you have given me. You have bestowed a gift upon the man. You have given me such a nice gift, that is the Greek wine. So you tell me what is your name. I shall gift you something in return. So Cyclops said that he had tasted grapes but had never tasted such divine juice. So Ulysses kept on pouring the wine and Cyclops kept on drinking it. Ulysses now mentioned his name. He said, my name is No Man. Ulysses said, my name is No Man. My friends call me by this name in my country. So it is Ulysses who is telling the Cyclops. So it is in direct speech. Ulysses is telling the Cyclops, my name is No Man. My men, the people in my area, my land, call me by this name. Cyclops now tells, okay, No Man, I shall eat you last. I shall spare your life till the last. After eating all your men, I shall eat you. By then, he reeled down and sank into deep sleep. Why? He had drunk so much of Greek wine that he felt unconscious. Ulysses watched this and now got ready as per their plan. They took the stake, put it in the fire which he had lit, which the Cyclops had lit, and held it till it was red hot, till that metal became red hot. They held it in the fire. Then the four men with great difficulty put the sharp red hot end into Cyclops' eye, that is the drunken cannibal's eye. The Cyclops Polyphemus is a cannibal. So they made it red hot and they put it in the eye which was on the forehead of the Cyclops. Cyclops woke up, roared with pain. Ulysses and his men fled and hid themselves in the corners of the cave. They were again frightened. The Cyclops removed the red hot stake from his eye and shouted with pain about the cave. He then cried and called the neighboring Cyclops. They heard his painful cry and gathered near the cave. They asked Polyphemus the cause of his cry. They asked him, they all came there and asked him, why are you crying so loudly? What has happened to you? Then he says, those people who come there, they say, why are you shouting and disturbing everybody? What is wrong with you? The Cyclops Polyphemus, who was inside the cave, answered that no man had hurt me, no man had killed me, no man was in the cave. So, only Polyphemus knew that Ulysses' name was No Man because he had said so. These other Cyclops who heard him say thought that some evil must have affected him. There must be something wrong with this person. Some evil must have affected him, and so no one can help him. They all went back to their caves which were on the hills. They all thought that some disease must have troubled him. So the Cyclops shouted with pain and moved up and down in the cave. In the dark, he searched for the doorway but could not find. Later he found and he removed the stone and sat on the threshold. He sat there so that he can catch hold of Ulysses and his men. And if they went out with his flock of sheep, so he knew that Ulysses and his men at least could not move the rock. So it was only he who had to move the rock. So he sat there on the threshold. If anyone went out, then he would catch them. Ulysses made knots of osier twigs, a small plant that has long flexible shoots, which are usually used for making of the baskets. Here he makes these twigs. Ulysses makes these twigs to tie his men around the ship. So Cyclops would usually sleep on it, on what these osier twigs. He would sleep on it. Ulysses now tied 3 of the healthy rams together. So Ulysses made knots of osier twigs. This osier is a small plant that has a long flexible shoot which is usually used for making of the baskets. Cyclops had used it for sleeping in his cave. He used to sleep on it. So what Ulysses did? He made twigs. He took this and he tied 3 of the healthy rams together. He took 3 rams and he tied. I told you, ram and Eve, a male and a female sheep. So he took this 3 of the rams and in the middle, below the middle one, he tied a man. In this way, he tied all his men and finally made arrangements for himself. He tied all his men in between 3 sheep. Again, he tied one in the middle sheep. Underneath, he tied one man. Again, he took 3 rams. Underneath the middle one, he tied his men. Like this, he tied all of them and then he was left out. He wrapped himself in the rich wool of one of the fairest of the flock. One sheep was very fair, white. So what he did? He wrapped himself in its wool. It had thick wool. Now the sheep began to move outside the entrance as usual. Cyclops would take all his animals outside for grazing on the mountainside. So the sheep began to move out. Cyclops very cleverly felt the backs of those fleecy wools, but he never dreamt that there could be a man under them. He never felt that his enemy hid below those rams. In this way, all the sheep passed. The last sheep came loaded with wool. Ulysses was hiding in this sheep. Cyclops felt the sheep at its back. He just held his hand on its back, on the sheep's back. He once had his hand in the hair of Ulysses, yet he could not make out it was Ulysses' head. The Cyclops just put his hand in the hair of the Ulysses' head, but he did not come to know it must be a man. He felt it must be the fleece. Now all had escaped. They were out of the cave. Ulysses found himself free and also helped his friends to free themselves. They carried the rams to the ship. They now piled the oars and set sail. When they left the shore and moved some distance, Ulysses cried to the Cyclops. He said, Cyclops, you should not be so proud of your strength that you are bestowed. You should not eat your guests. See, God has given you such a nice strength. You should not be proud of it. You should know how to treat your guests. Cyclops heard this voice, got angry, came forward, threw a big rock in the direction of the voice heard. However, the rock did not hit the ship. Ulysses further shouted and told Cyclops, if anyone asks you, who hurt you? Who hurt you or who hurt your eye? Then tell them, it was Ulysses, the son of Latus, the king of Itheca. So who was Ulysses? He was the son of Latus, the king of Itheca. They all sailed fast and bet the old sea and went forward with the strong wind, that is strong gale. So this is how Ulysses escaped with his remaining men from the clutches of the Cyclops Polyphemus. Thus ends the adventurous story of Ulysses and Cyclops. Hope you all have understood the summary of this lesson. Coming to the examination point of view, questions may be like, who was Ulysses? Who were the Cyclops? Why did Ulysses enter the land of Cyclops? How strong was Greek wine? How did Ulysses introduce himself and his men to the Cyclops? Why did Ulysses not attack Cyclops with his sword? What gift did Cyclops bestow on Ulysses after drinking the Greek wine? How did Ulysses escape from the cave? Who is a cannibal? What is a male and a female sheep called? Ram and Eve. So, questions of this type may be asked from this lesson, Ulysses and Cyclops. Hope you all have understood the summary of the lesson, children. So, there are almost 30 videos on English. I have completed with the prose, poetry and the non-detail part of English, subject of standard 10th. If you like my video, share and subscribe.